This program is supported by Northern Cement Max Plus, Supreme at Max Pro Northern Cement, Ahon, Bangon, Sulong, and SMC Global Power.
Hello, I'm Alma Angeles and you're watching Eagle News International. Good evening, CJ.
Good evening, Alma, and good evening to everyone joining the program. On tonight's headlines.
The moment.
Top scientists from the WHO in the United States say the Omicron variant appears to be no worse than other coronavirus strains when it comes to how badly the disease hits people.
The coronavirus vaccine developed jointly by BioNTech and Pfizer is still effective against the Omicron variant of the virus after 3 doses. The German company said that in a statement.
Australia will not send officials to February's Winter Olympics in Beijing, according to Prime Minister Scott Morrison, joining a U.S. diplomatic boycott of the Games.
And a Russian rocket lifts off, carrying a Japanese billionaire to the International Space Station, marking the country's return to space tourism after a decade-long pause that saw the rise of competition from privately held U.S. companies.
First in our news, the Omicron variant appears to be no worse than other coronavirus strains. That is according to top scientists from the WHO and the United States, while cautioning that more research is needed to judge its severity. The hopeful assessments came as global concern grew over the heavily mutated variant, which has forced dozens of nations to reimpose border restrictions and raise the possibility of a return to economically punishing lockdowns. Take a look.
At the moment, at least the preliminary data doesn't indicate that this is more severe. In fact, if anything, the direction is towards less severity. But again, that's early days and we have to be very careful in interpreting the data. We have highly effective vaccines. They've proved effective against all the variants so far in terms of severe disease and hospitalization. And there's no reason to expect that it wouldn't be so. And I would expect, quite frankly, that the vaccines we currently have will show efficacy against severe disease and hospitalization. But we have to measure that, and we have to confirm that that's the case, and we also have to confirm if there's any loss in that protection. But I would expect to see some protection there, and that's why it's so important that that's the best weapon we have right now, is to get vaccinated. So we know as the virus has taken that opportunity to evolve, and it is our belief that if we were distributing vaccines in a more equitable way, especially in high-risk populations, that we would be doing much more to avoid that. But the idea of, giving vaccine boosters to perfectly healthy younger adults who've already had 2 doses of vaccine, to the exclusion of vaccinating vulnerable people with a primary dose in low-income countries, that's when it becomes a real trade-off, where it becomes more unacceptable that that's happening.
Now, in any case, Dr. Ryan said, despite its mutations, the new COVID variant was still COVID and should be fought with the same measures, including vaccines, masks, and physical distancing.
The coronavirus vaccine of Pfizer, developed by BioNTech and Pfizer, is still effective against the Omicron variant of the virus after 3 doses. The German company said that in a statement today. Now, an Omicron-specific version of the jab currently in development by BioNTech would be available by March, it added. The Omicron variant has now been detected in at least 38 countries, though it has not yet been linked to any deaths, according to scientists, and they are particularly concerned by the unique constellation of more than 30 mutations on the spike protein that dots the surface of the coronavirus and allows it to invade cells. Top U.S. scientist Anthony Fauci said the science remains unclear on how the variant originated, but there are two main theories. Either it evolved inside the body of an immunocompromised patient, such as a person with HIV who failed to rapidly fight off the virus, or the virus could have crossed from humans to animals, then returned to people in a more mutated form, in an example of reverse zoonosis.
In other news, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres was exposed to the coronavirus on Tuesday by a UN official who already had COVID-19 and is isolating for the next few days, according to diplomatic sources. Guterres, 72, has canceled his upcoming in-person engagements. The UN chief was due to be the guest of honor of the UN Press Association in its annual gala in Manhattan today. On Thursday, he was to participate in a UN Security Council meeting on the challenges of terrorism and climate change led by Niger's President Mohamed Bazoum. The spokesman for the Secretary General, Stéphane Dujarric, declined to comment immediately on Mr. Guterres' condition. Dujarric indicated a few days ago that Guterres had recently received his third dose of the anti-coronavirus vaccine after having hesitated for a long time about the advisability of receiving booster shots, while millions of people throughout the world have yet to receive their first jab.
Papua New Guinea carried out the first in a series of mass COVID-19 burials, interring 54 people whose remains were unclaimed for months as the pandemic ravaged the under-resourced Melanesian nation. Hospital and government officials ordered the crisis ceremony after 300 bodies piled up at Port Moresby General Hospital morgue, overwhelming a facility designed to hold just 60. Some remains had been stored there since March as authorities tried to locate loved ones and secure scarce funding to carry out the last rites. Officially, it has detected about 35,000 cases in a population close to 9 million. But data from 700 clinics around the country showed that 2.6 million people, or more than a quarter of the population, presented with flu or pneumonia-like symptoms between March 2020 and September 2021.
In other pandemic news, Malaysia today announced further travel restrictions effective tomorrow for the Singapore-Malaysia Vaccinated Travel Lane, or VTL, the Langkawi travel bubble, and travelers from the United Kingdom, the United States, Australia, France, and Norway. Health Minister Khairi Jamaluddin said as of yesterday, the UK, US, Australia, France, and Norway have been put on Malaysia's travel list of countries that reported community transmission of the Omicron variant of concern. According to codeblue.galacenter.org, Malaysians and foreigners arriving in Malaysia from those countries must take an RT-PCR COVID test 2 days before departure, another PCR test upon arrival in Malaysia, as well as wear a digital tracker upon arrival at the international airport. Arrivals from the UK, US, Australia, France, and Norway will be subject to a 7-day or 10-day quarantine, depending on one's vaccination status, either at home or at designated quarantine stations. PCR tests are required on day 5 of the 7-day quarantine or on day 8 of the 10-day quarantine. Quarantine may be extended depending on risk evaluation on the last day of quarantine.
South Korea's number of daily new coronavirus infections hit another record, surpassing 7,000 cases, according to the Korea Disease Control and Prevention Agency. Take a look.
아들, 며느리들, 손자들 이렇게 올 때도 혹시라도 내가 만약에 확진자가 된다면은 어마어마한 파장이 퍼져버리니까 또 회사에서도
제가 작년에 입학을 했는데 대학 생활에 대해서 좀 기대를 많이 했었는데 지금 2년째 학교를 아예 거의 못 가보다시피 하니까 대학 사람들 사귀는데도 좀 문제가 있고 또 대학 생활을 아예 해보질 못해서 그런 점들이 불편한 것 같아요.
The country's average daily number of coronavirus cases stayed in the 5,000s over the past week. According to Yonhap, Prime Minister Kim Buk-kyum said the government will enhance the at-home treatment system to secure sustainability of the country's medical response capability, which includes measures to expand workforce and improve patient management. He added that oral COVID-19 medication will be provided to serious home treatment patients from the beginning of 2022. Prime Minister Kim called for extensive epidemiological investigation and swift testing to contain the Omicron variant believed to be more contagious than other variants. Now, as of Tuesday, the country confirmed 36 Omicron cases.
Back here in the Philippines, the number of daily coronavirus infections in the country has stayed below 400, with only 370 fresh cases logged today. The latest bulletin from the Department of Health showed that the country's active case tally is at 12,510, down from Tuesday's 13,026. And this is the second straight day when the country logged less than 400 new cases, following Tuesday's 356 new infections, the lowest single-day number of infections in 17 months. Another 859 new recoveries, meanwhile, raised the total tally to 2,773,322. Recoveries account for 97.8% of the total case count of 2,835,593 since the start of the pandemic last year. Among active cases, 4,974 are mild, 883 are asymptomatic, 476 are critical, 2,261 are severe, and 3,916 are moderate. The death toll has reached 49,761 with 171 new deaths.
The Interagency Task Force for the Management of Emerging Infectious Diseases, or IATF-EID, has placed France on the red list for COVID-19, which means travelers from the country are barred from entering the Philippines due to high risk of infection. Acting presidential spokesperson, Cabinet Secretary Carlo Nograles said in a press statement, passengers who have been to France within 14 days immediately preceding arrival in the Philippines and who arrive on or before 12:01 a.m. of December 10, but before 12:01 a.m. of December 13, shall be required to undergo facility-based quarantine for 14 days with a reverse transcription polymerase chain reaction test on the 7th day, with day 1 being the date of arrival. Notwithstanding a negative RT-PCR result, the completion of the 14-day quarantine is required. From 12:01 a.m. of December 13 until the end of December 15, entry in any port of the Philippines shall not be allowed for passengers coming from or who have been to France within the last 14 days prior to arrival in the Philippines, regardless of vaccination status. Now, only Filipinos returning to the country via government-initiated or non-government-initiated repatriation and bayanihan flights may be allowed entry, subject to existing testing and quarantine protocols for red list countries or territories or jurisdictions. Other countries such as South Africa, Botswana, Namibia, Zimbabwe, Lesotho, Eswatini, and Mozambique, Austria, the Czech Republic, Hungary, the Netherlands, Switzerland, Belgium, and Italy are also on the Philippines red list until December 15. On Wednesday, the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention moved France to its red list. Also on the red list are Andorra, Cyprus, Jordan, Liechtenstein, Portugal, and Tanzania. France registered a surge in COVID-19 hospitalizations as a rise in new infections in mid-November led to an increase in patient numbers.
Meanwhile, India's Defense Chief General Bipin Rawat and his wife were among 13 people killed in a helicopter crash today, according to the Air Force. Take a look. With deep regret, it has now been ascertained that General Bipin Rawat, Mrs. Madhulika Rawat, and 11 other persons on board have died in the unfortunate accident, according to the Air Force on Twitter. Rawat is India's first Chief of Defense Staff, a position that the government established in 2019 and is seen as close to Prime Minister Narendra Modi. The 63-year-old was traveling with his wife and 12 others in a Russian-made Mi-17 chopper that met with an accident today near Kannur, Tamil Nadu, according to the Indian Air Force. Rawat was headed to the Defense Services Staff College from the nearby Sulur Air Force Base in Coimbatore, and the helicopter was already making its descent. It came down around 10 kilometers from the nearest road, forcing emergency workers to trek to the accident site, another fire official told AFP. The general joined the Army as a second lieutenant in 1978 and has 4 decades of service behind him, having commanded forces in Indian-administered Kashmir and along the line of actual control bordering China. He's also credited with reducing insurgency on India's northeastern frontier and supervised a cross-border counter-insurgency operation into neighboring Myanmar.
Former Malaysian leader Najib Razak lost his appeal against a corruption conviction and 12-year jail term today, with the judge branding his actions a national embarrassment, but allowing him to remain free. The 68-year-old was found guilty on all counts last year in the first of several trials he is facing related to the looting of the One Malaysia Development Berhad Sovereign Wealth Fund. Najib and his cronies were accused of stealing billions of dollars from the investment vehicle, with the allegations contributing to his long-ruling coalition's ejection from power in 2018. The former prime minister's first trial was related to the transfer of 42 million ringgit, or about $9.9 million, from a former 1MDB unit to his bank accounts. Najib, who has remained free on bail, denies wrongdoing, but the Court of Appeal upheld his conviction on charges including money laundering and abuse of power. Judge Abdul Karim Abdul Jalil rejected the defense's argument that some of Najib's actions were in the national interest. Judge Karim also rejected Najib's defense that he believed the cash was a donation from Saudi royalty, saying there was no evidence for the claim. But he agreed to a request for Najib to stay out of prison on bail while he lodges a final appeal with Malaysia's top court.
Back here in the country, Department of Energy, or DOE Secretary Alfonso Cusi's legal camp is standing by the libel case filed by the Secretary against several news organizations. And this is in reference to the news articles that were released by the news agencies concerning the Malampaya Shares Purchase Agreement. During the Laging Handa public briefing today, Cusi's legal counsel, Attorney Rui Orendain, said that all instances that would destroy a person's reputation may be deemed as libelous. Take a look.
Yung root nun, yung pinagmulan nun is yung mga articles na pinublish tungkol sa Malampaya Share Purchase Agreement na supposedly hindi inaktuhan ni Secretary Cusi. Finailan ng libel because mahaba yung definition ng libel sa batas pero kahit di ka nakapag-aral, simpleng-simple lang yan. Lahat ng nakakasira ng reputasyon, libelous ka. Well, kasi yung sinasabi nila existing na kaso, hindi pa napuprove yun na mayroong kaso in fact, ang balita ko is at ang basis nung report nila is press conference at press kit, hindi existing na case. In any case, kahit may existing na kaso, may mga requirements pa rin yung batas kung masi-shield yung publisher ng libelous article na kailangan i-prove nila, na kailangan fair and true report, pagkatapos kailangan walang comment, at pagkatapos meron dapat genuine effort to make some verification ng truth ng publication. Opo. Hindi lang basta-basta may kaso, ka na. lahat ng mangyayari na nakakaapekto ng gobyerno, ng pamahalaan, ng publiko, dapat mabalita talaga kung sa Malampaya, basta may epekto sa publiko nga. No? Kay Secretary Cusi bilang public officer, dapat mabalitaan yung behavior niya sa public officer. Yung family, yung personal ng family, wag naman.
Opo.
At saka dapat kung may report man sa Malampaya, kay Secretary Cusi, dapat naman clear and true report.
The lawyer said that the said case has not yet been proven and that the media reports were merely based on press conference that happened. Now, the lawyer also said that even if there was an existing case, there are still requirements of the law.
The Commission on Elections, or COMELEC, has deposited the final local source code and trusted build of the automated election system as of the May 9, 2022 elections to its Information Technology Department in preparation for its escrow at the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas. COMELEC Executive Director Bartolome Sines Cruz Jr. and ITD Acting Director Jeannie Flororita received the codes during the turnover ceremony held at Diamond Hotel in Manila on Wednesday afternoon. The trusted build of the AES was completed last December 3 by international systems and software testing firm ProVV in Huntsville, Alabama, USA. The trusted build is the process of assembling the overall program that will govern the entire AES using the reviewed components.
By anyone, precisely because it is in the vault of the BSP. This is very important. The two directors will now be proceeding to the COMELEC again to deposit the source codes in the ITT vault preparatory to their being deposited in escrow in the Bangko Sentral of the Philippines. For those of you who might be new to this deposit of the source code in escrow to the Bangko Sentral is necessary to ensure that there is a trusted copy of the final trusted build, a trusted copy that will not be open to tampering or any possible alteration by anyone, precisely because it is in the vault of the BSP. This is a very important security and transparency measure. Now, the source code and the codes held by the ITD both are accompanied by unique hash codes. These are independently verifiable hash codes which will be published in the COMELEC website, and it will allow people to check for themselves if the BCMs that they're using on election day are the same unaltered machines that have been subjected to the final trust build. Again, this is also an important transparency measure, as well as a means of ensuring that the elections are legitimate and that the machines have not been tampered in any way.
And the news continues here on Eagle News. CJ and I will be back right after this.
Alam namin ang iyong pagsisikap. Dama namin ang iyong mga sakripisyo. Kita namin ang pagharap mo sa bawat pagsubok. Kaya sa kabila ng mga hamon ng buhay, nandito kami para umalalay. Kasi katulad mo, gusto rin namin ang magandang bukas para sa kanya. Hatid namin ang dekalidad na edukasyon at makabagong pasilidad sa abot kayang halaga. Kaya huwag ka na mangamba. Sasamahan ka namin tuparin ang mga pangarap niya. Maaasahan mong sulit dito ang mga pinagsikapan mo. Sa aming mga makabagong pasilidad at sistema ng edukasyon. May lalabas natin ang aking talino at mga kakayahan niya. Kahit sa munting halaga, makakasiguro ka na makakasabay siya sa mabilis na pag-ikot ng mundo. Sa New Era, karamay mo kami sa bawat hamon. Kaagapay mo kami sa bawat hakbang. Kasama mo kami sa bawat ngiti at tagumpay.
Welcome back. China today accused Australia of political posturing and selfish games after Canberra announced a diplomatic boycott of the Beijing Winter Olympics over human rights concerns. Foreign Ministry spokesman Wang Wenbin slammed Australia for blindly following the U.S. in announcing a boycott, adding that whether they come or not, nobody cares. Prime Minister Scott Morrison said Canberra's decision comes amid disagreement with China over a slew of issues, from Australia's foreign interference, laws to a recent decision to acquire nuclear-powered submarines, and more. Take a look.
It is not surprising, therefore, that Australian government officials would therefore not be going to China for those games. Australian athletes will, though. Australia's a great sporting nation. And I very much separate the issues of sport and these other political issues. They're issues between two governments. And I would like to see those issues resolved, but they are not resolved. We have always been open to meet with the Chinese government to talk about their concerns, whether it's their concerns with our foreign interference legislation or other foreign investment rules, where Australia takes a very strong stand, standing up for Australia's interests. They've been very critical of Australia in our efforts to ensure that we have a strong national defence force, particularly in relation, most recently, to our decision to acquire nuclear-powered submarines. But, of course, the human rights abuses in Xinjiang and the many other issues that Australia has consistently raised. We have been very pleased and very happy to talk to the Chinese government about these issues, and there's been no obstacle to that occurring on our side. But the Chinese government has consistently not accepted those opportunities for us to meet about these issues. Australia will not step back from the strong position we've had standing up for Australia's interests.
中方没有邀请任何澳大利亚政府官员出席北京冬奥会，他们来或者不来，没有人会在意。澳方政客出于政治私利、作秀、炒作，对北京成功举办冬奥会不会有任何影响。
Australia's ties with China have been in free fall in recent years, with Beijing introducing a raft of punitive sanctions on Australian goods in a fierce political dispute that has plunged relations into the most serious crisis since the Tiananmen Square crackdown in 1989. China has been angered at Australia's willingness to legislate against overseas influence operations, to bar Huawei from 5G contracts, and to call for an independent investigation into the origins of the pandemic. A raft of Australian goods, including barley, coal, cotton, timber, rock lobsters, wine, beef, grain, and dairy products, have all been subject to sanctions from its largest trading partner. Australia's recent move to equip its Navy with nuclear-powered submarines under a new defense pact with Britain and the U.S., widely seen as an attempt to counter Chinese influence in the Pacific region, further infuriated Beijing.
The International Olympic Committee, or IOC, said it respected the U.S. government's announcement of a diplomatic boycott of the 2022 Beijing Winter Olympics. Take a look.
Of course, that this is a political domain. It's a political decision, which we respect their right to take that decision. But what it also shows is that they respect the right of the athletes to take part in the Olympic Games, and I think that's very important.
The diplomatic boycott is a calibrated rebuke of China's human rights records that stops short of preventing U.S. athletes from competing. The decision comes after Washington spent months wrangling with what position to take on the Games, hosted in February next year by a country it accuses of perpetrating genocide against Uyghur Muslims in the northwestern Xinjiang region. The Kremlin on Tuesday criticized the United States for announcing a diplomatic boycott of the upcoming Olympics in Beijing, saying the Games should be free of politics. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said that he was positive, however, that participants were not impacted by the decision. The move drew fiery opposition from Beijing, which threatened unspecified countermeasures, saying the United States would pay for the price for its wrongdoing.
美方炮制所谓新疆存在种族灭绝的 世纪谎言早已被事实戳穿，美方出于意识形态偏见，基于谎言、谣言，试图干扰北京冬奥会，这只会让人看清美方的险恶用心。美方将为其错误行径付出代价，请大家拭目以待。
In other news, the German parliament elected Olaf Scholz as chancellor today, turning the page on 16 years with Angela Merkel at the helm as a new center-left-led coalition takes the wheel of Europe's top economy. Scholz, who won 395 of the 707 votes cast in the Bundestag lower house, has pledged broad continuity with the popular Merkel while making Germany greener and fairer. Asked by Parliament Speaker Barbel Bass whether he accepted the election, a beaming Scholz nodded and then received bouquets of flowers from MPs
Im Namen der Bundesrepublik
to congratulate him. The finance minister under Merkel led his Social Democrats to victory in the September 26 election, an outcome considered unthinkable at the start of the year given the party's then festering divisions and anemic support. Scholz, 63, who turned emulating Merkel in style and substance into a winning strategy, has now cobbled together Germany's first national traffic light coalition with the ecologist Greens and the liberal Free Democrats, nicknamed after the party's colors. The alliance aims to slash carbon emissions, overhaul decrepit digital infrastructure, modernize citizenship laws, and lift the minimum wage.
A Thai tycoon accused of poaching wildlife in a national park lost his final appeal Wednesday in a long-running saga that drew public outrage over the elite's perceived immunity. Construction magnate Prem Chai Karnasuta was arrested in February 2018 when park officials found guns, animal carcasses, including of a Kalige pheasant and a red muntjac, and the pelt of a black leopard at his campsite. Prem Chai was found not guilty of possessing a leopard carcass, but he was convicted of 3 other poaching-related charges and sentenced to 16 months in jail. It was raised to 3 years and 2 months by the appeals court. On Wednesday, the Supreme Court upheld the guilty verdict and sentence of 3 years and 2 months, according to a court official. He and 2 other defendants were ordered to pay 2 million baht, or $60,000 in compensation. Prem Chai will not receive a suspended sentence, according to the Attorney General's office. He has been sent to Tong Papum District Prison. Prem Chai's firm, Italian Thai Development Company, is behind major infrastructure projects such as Bangkok's SkyTrain and the Suvarnabhumi Airport. He and his sister were on the Forbes top 50 richest list for Thailand until 2016, with an estimated $630 million fortune at the time, but they have since dropped off the ranking.
In other news, Facebook parent Meta will ban all pages and accounts belonging to Myanmar military-backed businesses, it said, expanding its restraints on the country's armed forces. Myanmar's secretive military has extensive business interests with tentacles in industries such as diverse as beer, tobacco, transportation, textiles, tourism, and banking. Activists and rights groups say they funded crackdowns and abuses even before the February coup that ousted Aung San Suu Kyi and launched a bloody crackdown on dissent. In late February, Facebook removed all accounts linked to the military, also known as the Tatmadaw, citing the junta's use of deadly force against anti-coup demonstrators. It also banned military-linked firms from advertising on its platforms. The pages of Miyawadi Trading Limited, Miyawadi Bank, and Myanmar Beer, all included in the 2019 report, were all inaccessible as of today. A page for a film production company allegedly run by the daughter of junta chief Min Aung Hlaing was also blocked.
Eagle News will be back with more stories. Please don't go away.
Pangarap ng bawat Pilipino, hangarin ng Northern Cement.
Ahon, bangon, sulong!
Pinalaki ng Northern Cement ang kapasidad ng kanilang planta para steady ang supply ng sementong tigasin. Northern Cement Max Plus, Supreme at Max Pro.
Ahon, bangon, sulong!
Mula noon hanggang ngayon, gabay natin ang MTRCB ratings sa matalino at responsableng panonood. Sa tamang pagsunod sa MTRCB ratings, ginagawa nating ligtas at makabuluhan ang panonood ng bawat miyembro ng pamilyang Pilipino. Lumipas man ang panahon, hanggang may pamilyang Pilipino, andyan ang MTRCB.
Welcome back to the news. The World Bank has upgraded its economic outlook for the Philippines this year to 5.3%, higher than its projection in September at 4.3%. The World Bank revised its growth upward after observing that the economy grew in the first 3 quarters of 2021, despite the reimposition of the most stringent community quarantine in late March and early August. World Bank Country Director for Brunei, Malaysia, Philippines, and Thailand, Indiame Diop, said in a virtual briefing Tuesday that in the first 3 quarters of the year, the Philippine economy grew by 4.9% from a 10.1% contradiction in the same period in 2020. The World Bank's outlook for the country in 2022 and 2023 is higher at 5.8%. Economic growth for the next 2 years will be driven by consumption, infrastructure spending, vaccination, and revival arrival of businesses, he said. However, Diop said a potential new wave of infection in the future remains a key risk to economic growth. He added even countries with high vaccination rates are still experiencing surges due to the new strains of COVID-19, but the vaccination manages the severity of cases and mortality due to the virus.
In other business news, Chinese property firm Kaisa suspended share trading in Hong Kong on Wednesday as questions swirl over its ability to make repayments and contagion spreads within the country's debt-ridden real estate sector. The Chinese government sparked a crisis within the property industry when it launched a drive last year to curb excessive debt among real estate firms as well as rampant consumer speculation. Companies that had accrued huge debt to expand suddenly found the taps turned off and began struggling to complete projects, pay contractors, and meet both domestic and foreign repayments. Kaisa, China's 27th largest real estate firm in terms of sales, but one of its most indebted, became the latest company to spook investors when it announced on Friday that it had failed in a bid for a debt swap that could buy it crucial time. It is the second time the company has suspended trading in the last month. On Tuesday, Evergrande also missed a deadline to repay some of its overseas creditors, raising the prospect of it defaulting as it prepares for a government-backed mega restructure. Bloomberg News reported some of the $82.5 million in overdue coupon payments it owed by the end of Tuesday, when a 30-day grace period ran out, remained unpaid. Ratings group S&P has predicted that a default by Evergrande is now inevitable. Questions have swirled over whether Evergrande is simply too big to be allowed to fail, given its collapse could send shock waves through the wider Chinese economy.
James Harden and Kevin Durant led a late fight back as the Brooklyn Nets overturned a 17-point third-quarter deficit to edge past the Dallas Mavericks on Tuesday. Harden and Durant combined for 47 points in a 102-99 road victory for Brooklyn, who led the Eastern Conference with 17 wins against 7 losses. Brooklyn's victory was sealed by a devastating burst of scoring in the fourth quarter, with the Nets overwhelming Dallas 27-13. Brooklyn took the lead for the first time in the game with a Harden free throw to make it 91-90 with 6 minutes and 41 remaining. Dallas star Luka Doncic twice regained the lead for the Mavericks, but a 25-foot three-pointer from Patty Mills edged Brooklyn back in front at 98-97 with just under 3 minutes on the clock. A Harden layup put Brooklyn 197 ahead, and Durant's fadeaway completed the net scoring. The win at Dallas's American Airlines Center was vindication for Brooklyn coach Steve Nash, who left Harden and Durant on the court for over 41 minutes and 14 minutes, respectively.
We'll go for a short break, and Eagle News will be right back.
Tulong para sa kabuhayan ng mga katutubong AITAS, inihatid ng Responde. Pagsagip sa mga batang rugby sa Santa Rosa, Laguna, ikinasa. Mga batang isinilang na may club foot, bibigyan ng pag-asa na makapaglakad ng diretso. Sabado, alas 6 hanggang alas 7 ng gabi. Ito ang Responde, mata ng mamamayan.
Welcome back. A Russian rocket lifted off today carrying a Japanese billionaire to the International Space Station, marking the country's return to space tourism after a decade-long pause that saw the rise of competition from U.S. companies. Take a look. Online fashion tycoon Yusaku Maezawa and his production assistant Yozo Hirano blasted off from the Russian-operated Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan at 07:38 GMT, according to an AFP correspondent at the scene, and their journey aboard the three-person Soyuz spacecraft piloted by cosmonaut Alexander Misurkin will take just over 6 hours, capping a banner year that many have seen as a turning point for private space travel. Billionaires Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, and Richard Branson all made breakthrough commercial tourism flights this year, bursting into a market Russia is keen to defend. The 46-year-old billionaire has set out 100 tasks to complete on board, including hosting a badminton tournament in orbit. The ISS is home to an international crew of 7 people, including 2 Russian cosmonauts and a Japanese astronaut. Maezawa, who's a space enthusiast, also plans to take 8 people with him on a 2023 mission around the moon operated by Musk's SpaceX. He and his assistant are the first private Japanese citizens to visit space since journalist Toyohiro Akiyama traveled to the Mir station back in 1990.
Finally, in our news, when she lost a leg to cancer at the age of 10, Xiao Yue never imagined she could learn to dance. Now she is a national wheelchair dancing champion who hopes her story can help change perceptions towards the disabled in China. Take a look.
当时找我的时候，我很抗拒的，因为很胖。然后的话，第一是自己反映说很胖，然后对这种跳舞啊完全没概念，因为那时候想着一条腿残疾人脚不好怎么跳舞，所以内心其实是很抗拒的。他们不知道我们轮椅可以转圈，可以跑动，可以和健全人一样，就是轮椅，我们的手就等于是他们的脚，他们的脚能做的舞步，我们的手同样可以达到。这是给我一个另外不一样的经历。其实我很珍惜这一种，我不会因为说我是残疾人而自暴自弃，只是觉得我只是换了一种不一样的活法，我会活得更精彩。
压低，一定要做到肩膀倾斜。
Inspiring.
I know. She's also very graceful.
We have no excuse
That's
to
right.
not learn how to dance. And that's it for tonight's broadcast. Thank you so much for joining us. I am CJ Hero. The news continues tomorrow.
And at the end of the day, as I always say, there remains so much more to be grateful for. We'll see you back tomorrow. I'm Alma Angeles, and we live in interesting times.